In this video, we'll be talking about the signal joining toolbox, and there's a few topics to cover in this video. One of them being the general overview of the signal joining environment, so we'll be talking about that. The other thing we'll be covering is just basic corrections, so corrections coming into the signal joining toolbox, how to get them propagated and displayed on the output port. And finally, we'll also be covering the topic of overlap. So what happens when there's a region and there's an overlap? How do we cope with that? So the first thing to look at is the signals going in. So if we quick view that data, we can see that we've got a few corrections on signal 1. And the second port, we've also got a few deletions as well. So let's double click and open the signal joining toolbox and take a look at the environment. So we've got the grid view format in front of us, and you can see that we've got 4 colors here. So for each signal we have a corrected and a raw, and also for the second signal as well we've got the red, which is the corrected, and the black, which is the raw data. Okay, on the left hand side is what we call the time series manager. So this is where we get to kind of propagate the corrections through and also give some sort of priority to those signals as well. So at the top here we have the signal joining properties, and so each and every signal that's passed into the toolbox is basically listed in this window right here. And if we want to kind of exclude any of those signals, we'd basically uncheck these boxes next to them. And if we want to include those corrections on each of those signals, we can check these boxes. And if we don't, we can always uncheck them. Also, we have the input signals section here, and this basically lists all of those signals that are coming into this toolbox. Once we click the show joined output signal, we basically get both of those, or the number of those AOPs, joined into one signal, which is that top one. So as you can see, we've got turbidity file 1. So it's basically generated that AOP, and this is what's going to be created on the output port. So with this button here, we basically toggle between the input signals coming in and the final joined output signal. And we also get the properties port that we always get for all of the AOPs within Aquarius. So one other thing to cover is the reason why the first signal is in bold, and that's basically telling you that that is the master signal, and the master signal is what propagates and carries forward the data ID. So when you use the Aquarius database, for example, that's when you plug it into Write2DB, this is where it will recognize that signal because it's come from the database, and then it can be replaced within that same database. So that's the main reason why the master database is in bold there, just to remind you that that's the master signal. Okay, so one other kind of thing to cover is overlap regions. So if I zoom into this region right here, we can see that there's a bit of an overlap. So there's an overlap with this region and this region here. So the question is, how do we actually resolve this? How do we say that I actually want this to be the main one, or this one to be the kind of overlapping, or given the priority, if you like? And the way we do that is by basically changing the order of those signals. So if we select that file 1 and drop it down, what will happen now, if I zoom back into that region, what I need to do is click Show Joined Output Signal, and basically we're saying that this second signal is given priority. So if I move this back to the first position and zoom back in, we can see that the first signal is given priority. So this section is used and then joined onto signal number 2. So that's basically how we would use the signals and put them in, prioritize them basically, and give priority to overlapped regions. Finally, the last thing I want to cover is what happens if there's corrections that you don't want propagated through to the output port. And the answer to that is basically to uncheck the box next to the signal in the column include corrections. And basically by unchecking them, you're saying no, I don't want that propagated through. So if I uncheck this box, you can see that this second signal here is now all just one color. So it's basically going to use the raw data and propagate that through to the output port. And once you're happy with your changes and the changes that you've made, you can then basically save to the output port and exit, and on the output port you will get those corrections and the priority of those overlaps propagated through.